Good afternoon, and welcome to the Community Impact Luncheon presented by Greystone Power Corporation. I am Trent North, Chairman of the Board of Directors for your Douglas County Chamber, and I would like to personally thank you for joining us today. At this time, I would like to bring up Douglas County's second best dancer, none other than Paul, to give the invocation in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Paul, second best dancer.
The trophy says otherwise. Okay, before you guys start eating, I'm gonna. Oh, y'all worry. I'm just kidding. Let's bow our heads, please. Lord, bless this food to the nourishment of our bodies. As we start this new year, Lord, please encourage us all to be kind to one another, to encourage one another, and to always seek the truth in all things. As we enter into this election year again, let us be reminded that we can disagree and still love one another. Lord, be with our family members, our friends who may be struggling with health, financial, or family concerns. Most importantly, Lord, encourage us that if we have the means to help others, it's our obligation to do so. I pray we all seek wisdom and give the grace that God gives us daily. In God's holy name, amen. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, I would like to recognize some of our special guests today. If you are a board member, would you please stand and introduce yourself at this time? Thank you for your service. At this time, if we would have our diplomats and business outreach team, if you would just stand at this time. Thank you for your service as well. If we have any elected officials joining us today, would you please stand and introduce yourself? They're campaigning. We are also proud of our 2024 Cornerstone investors that are joining us today. I'm sure many of you noted them on the slides prior to the luncheon, but I do want to say thank you and recognize the group sitting here in the front of the room. Chairman Circle Visionary Partners, please stand and introduce yourself at this time. And we do just have the Vice Chairman of the Douglas County Board of Commissioners, and if we'll just have her to introduce herself. Glad to have you here with us today.
Hello, everybody. I'm Terenia Carpenter, Vice Chair of the Douglas County Board of Commissioners.
Thank you. At this time, I'm excited to introduce our speakers for today's discussion on the state of the economy. Each speaker will provide their perspective on the region's economy's landscape for 2024. We will then conclude with a few questions and answers. Please help me welcome to the stage Dr. Jerry Parrish with the Metro Atlanta Chamber and Dr. Joseph Smith from the University of West Georgia at this time. Are they going to stand the entire time? Oh, okay, got you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate the invitation to speak today. Let's see if I can get this thing to work. There we go. I'm Jerry Parrish. I'm the new chief economist at the Metro Atlanta Chamber. But I'm not new to Georgia. I will tell you, but a little over 20 years ago, I lived in Coweta County. And I had just finished my PhD. And I actually saw an advertisement. Remember, and you guys my age, you know, we used to look for jobs in the classified ads of the newspaper. That is so foreign to these young kids. And I teach grad students, so I'm around young kids a pretty good bit. I'm still on the faculty at Florida State University and have been for about the last dozen years. But I saw an advertisement that says, "Come help us rebuild one of the great brands of motorcycling." And it was Triumph Motorcycles had just come back into business and opened up a spot down in Peachtree City. And so I lied on my resume to get an interview, took off my PhD and all that stuff that I thought they would not want to see on a resume. And I actually got an interview with them and talked them into hiring me and had a great time. So I'm glad to be back in Georgia. Certainly, we've been watching Georgia. I've been down in Florida for about the last 20 years and really was impressed with the Georgia economy, how it was developing, and super impressed with the Georgia legislature about how they were really interested and very steady in recruiting businesses to the state. And certainly, we competed against them, the state of Georgia, and Georgia won a lot. And actually, that's one of the things I want to talk about, how Georgia has been doing their economy since the pandemic. But here's what we see in the headlines now. Payroll's still strong. More jobs are being created than we even expect, even though people say the economy's slowing down a little bit. So let's think about the history over the past few years, how Georgia has been doing compared to the U.S. And I don't think this is going to surprise a lot of you, but here I am, showing the U.S. in black. This is percentage job growth year over year compared to Georgia in red. And you can see in every year except the big pandemic year, the Georgia economy did better. And overall, what's interesting is when you think about over this period of time since 2014, Georgia saw a 21.9% increase in jobs. And we'll talk about, how many jobs and those kind of things later, a little more detail. But that's, interesting, versus 14.5% for the U.S. as a whole. So Georgia's growing at a substantially higher rate, basically about a time and a half of what the U.S. has been growing. What does that mean for the state of Georgia? When you think about if Georgia had just grown at the average rate as the U.S., that's about a difference of 300,000 more jobs in Georgia than if we had grown at an average rate during that same period of time for the U.S. So 300,000 more people working, more families, certainly people moving in for opportunity. That's been great for the state. Now let's think about what kind of jobs those have been here in over the past year. Let's think about this. This is for the state of Georgia. 103,000 jobs, a lot of health care, social assistance. A lot of that has been ambulatory health care. And I had to look that up. It's like, what is ambulatory health care? That's outpatient care. That's a big deal. Accommodation, food services, more people means more restaurants, more hotels, those kind of things. Record tourism means that. A lot more government jobs, but you may be surprised at this. Actually, state government jobs are down. Quite a few more federal jobs and a whole lot more local government jobs than state jobs. And real estate, you see the other ones there. But what it's been is a really good growth pattern. And we see payrolls are up. You can see here, payroll up 7.6% year over year. This is total payroll, versus the U.S. at 5.6. Georgia 5.7. And you can see the surrounding counties here. These are actually the 29 counties that I'm responsible for. This is the Metro Atlanta, Chambers footprint for these 29 counties. And one thing you may not know is we had one county drop out and we added a new one. This is a Census Bureau designation of a metro area. Average weekly wages going up 4% over the last year here in Douglas County compared to U.S. at 3.3 and Georgia at 3.5. GDP increases. A lot of people think about GDP in the wrong way. They think it's something that they don't understand and don't have a hope of understanding, and it's some government people manipulating a bunch of numbers. I want you to think about GDP as value added. You bring something into your county and you add value to it, and I mean, it can be a crop growing in the field, you freeze it and put it in a bag. Hey, that's value added. If it's a manufacturing process, it's probably pretty high value added. And the reason that GDP is important is that high value added job is probably a high wage job. So if you're growing your GDP at higher rate than your neighbors or, the county or the state or whatever, then it's very, very highly correlated with high wage jobs. Here's the GDP numbers here. I see my little circle has moved up. Douglas County was in the circle. Sometimes these slides get changed around when I email them out. But you can see Douglas County's GDP, 31.8% increase over this 2019 to 22 period. That's a lot bigger than the Metro Atlanta, 17.6, Georgia, 18.6. So what that's telling you is there are high wage jobs being created here. And sometimes I know the economic developers are in the room. This is a very, very important metric. This is one of the things that you guys can be really proud of here because you're in the range and higher than a lot of the counties in the metro area. So that's the good news. You got people moving in. That's more business, more opportunities for people. Certainly, one of the things that everybody has been asking me about, though, lately is what's going on in the economy. And one of the things that happened about a year ago, if you polled the economists around the state and around the country, about 85% of them would have said we're going into a recession in the year 2023. And I'm going to show you why they said that. Because there's what has been a reliable signal of a recession coming actually happened. And what it's called is the yield curve inversion. And I won't go through a lot of detail here, but what that means is short-term interest rates are higher than long-term interest rates. And it typically happens because the Federal Reserve is pushing up interest rates on the short end because they're trying, to kill inflation or, that kind of thing. And that's exactly what we've happened. So what you do is you take the 10-year rate and subtract the 2-year rate. And when it's negative, that's a yield curve inversion because normally a longer term interest rate would be higher. And it's like you're loaning people money, you're going to demand more interest if it's a longer term loan. That makes sense to, I think, most people. There's more risk, so you have to get a higher interest rate. So the Federal Reserve puts out this report that shows, the 10s minus 2, their normalized constant maturity, and this is the actual thing you kind of look at. That black line across there is zero. If you're below zero, you're in a yield curve inversion, and we've been in one since July of 2022. So it always has happened in the past. Every time it goes negative, you see one of these gray bars. Well, the gray bar is a recession. And so it even happened during the COVID recession. We can't even figure out why that did, but it certainly did, just barely. But so what you see is every time you have an inversion, you have a recession. And we've gotten so used to seeing that most economists said, hey, we're going to have a recession in 2023. Well, it didn't happen. And now there's so much uncertainty out there that people are asking economists like us, me and Dr. Joey, to come in and talk about what's going on. So I want to show you a few of the headlines that you see out there now. We see Chairman Powell of the Federal Reserve coming out and saying, we're going to probably drop interest rates later this year and probably as much as 3 times. And the market is building in 5 or 6 interest rate drops during 2024. It's a little bizarre, because none of us know what's going to happen. None of us know when it's going to happen or what's going to happen here. So here's what some of the headlines are. Here's this guy from Anderson Capital Management, smart guy, comes and says, hey, the Fed is not going to drop rates this year. Here you see other folks saying, here's why the Fed isn't going to cut interest rates. So you got some guy saying they're not going to do it. Here's another guy coming in here and saying, here's why they're not going to do it. And so it's got to be confusing. And a lot of business people are trying to make decisions. Tremendous amount of uncertainty out there. Nobody knows what's happening to the financial markets. The market is telling you one thing and everybody else is telling you something else. And yet we've got an election year coming up, creates a bunch of uncertainty. And a lot of times what happens is people don't invest when there's greater amounts of uncertainty. So what are some of the other headlines here? Well, this group here, the portfolio manager, smart guy, comes out and says, we're expecting a mild recession. When you've got all these other people saying, hey, we're in for a soft landing. The Federal Reserve says we're in for a soft landing. A lot of other people are. But here's some of the people that are saying that we're not. And here's this guy, Jeremy Siegel up at Wharton, a super smart guy, has been right a lot of the time in the past. What he says big rate cuts may mean a really serious slowdown. So what does that mean? And here we got yesterday what happened. Now, I don't know if you read the news, but our state economists came out and said Georgia's going to be in a recession in early 2024. Now, going back to the last slide for a second, why do you think that if we see big interest rates drop, we're going to see a recession? That's the big mystery here. I'm not going to talk much about it here, but one of the things you need to think about is, if the Federal Reserve sees a bigger slowdown than kind of people expect, you would expect them to drop interest rates any further, right? So the jury's still out. A great amount of uncertainty. I know Dr. Joey's going to get up here and talk about things, but even the economists and the financial people can't argue. Can't agree on what's happening here. We saw a group of economists from the University of Georgia go around the state over the past couple of months and said, hey, there's probably a 50% chance of the U.S. going into a recession and only a 30% chance of Georgia going into a recession. Yet here the state economists, doing something else, saying that, yeah, we're probably going to go into a recession. So maybe Dr. Joey has the answer. I'm going to actually turn it over to him. I'll be available for questions, but I want Dr. Joey to come up here and talk about what he thinks. And then certainly, if you guys want my opinion, you can bring it up during the question and answer session. Thanks a lot.
I didn't know if anybody was supposed to come up here after and transition between the two, so just consider this an awkward segue. I'm going to cover as much as I can of a 2-hour lecture in 20 minutes. One of the things I want to start off by saying is things are not as bad as everybody thinks they are. I'm about to hit myself in the eye with a microphone here. There we go. Things are not quite as bad as probably most think it is right now. We're seeing still significant job growth in our area, significant increases in output. The GDP numbers that we were just talking about, that is an indicator. One of the things that is still marching right along is the housing market. We're not seeing the huge increases in prices that we have in the past, but even in our housing market in this area, we're still seeing growth in prices, and part of that is that we're not seeing a huge increase in inventories like we did in 2000 to 2006. So we haven't overbuilt. This means that housing values are probably going to stay relatively constant, if not still continue to increase, even if we have a recession. And so the economic outlook for 2024 is actually improved from what we were expecting in 2023. This is something that was alluded to earlier, that a lot of economists, myself included, thought that we would be in a recession in 2023, and it never happened. And so it doesn't mean that that inverted yield curve is not indicative of a recession at some point. It just means that it's not happened yet. And so we're going to start off by talking about labor market conditions. Labor market conditions in our area are still really in good shape. And so oftentimes we start off by looking at new unemployment insurance claims. Claims typically are thought of as a leading indicator. If claims start up, if new claims start to rise, this means that the economy is basically laying off workers. And new claims have been increasing. I know you can't see it here. It's because we have COVID in the map here. We've got COVID on the screen, and so you can't see the increase. If you zoom into the most recent couple of years, you can see that there is a slight increase in the number of new unemployment insurance claims. It's probably not enough to really worry about right now, though. We haven't seen a huge spike in new unemployment claims. It's just been trending in the upward direction. In fact, the last month of data is down. And so there was an improvement last month over previous months. Unemployment rates have gone up recently, but now they're actually back down a little bit. Our area here, Douglas County, right now y'all are at the top of the region in terms of unemployment rates. But being at the top of the region means that you are currently, go one more slide over here, at 3.3% unemployment rate. Okay, 3.3% in terms of historical unemployment rates is minuscule. There are not very many people in the West Georgia region, this is the West Georgia region now, there's not very many people in the West Georgia region who are currently unemployed. 3% total, and y'all are at 3.3% in the county. So just a smidge more. One of the things I also want to point out is that there's been concerns about labor force, about not having enough people to fill the jobs that are available recently. You've heard some terms thrown around like Great Resignation, things like that. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But we are now above, well above where we were in terms of labor force levels now as opposed to before COVID hit. So we're up almost 10,000 laborers in the region. Right now, Douglas County is up right around 3,000 additional laborers in their job in the labor market in the county itself. And so we've recovered everybody that was either quit, that were laid off during the COVID period, the intense COVID period. They're back, and there's more, okay? So not very much of a change also between last year's unemployment rate, which was at 3% for Douglas, now at 3.3%. And so one of the things I also want to point out is that when you look at these two graphs here, you're hoping that the blue line stays relatively low and that the red line continues unabated, that you keep getting new workers in the system and you keep your unemployment rate low, because it means you're employing basically everybody that comes online from your schools and everybody that moves in looking for a job. You've been able to basically do that. Keep in mind also that when we talk about the unemployment rate, we usually start thinking about a bad unemployment rate as being somewhere 5.5%, 6% or up from there. This is not a bad unemployment rate. If you look at Carroll, you're seeing basically the same thing. And in fact, if you look at all the different counties in the region, with the exception of Polk County, unemployment rates are remaining low and the labor force is growing in every one of those counties. And that's a significant positive thing to be occurring. And this is recent data too. So, we're talking about data that is into December. into November. And so we're talking about more recent data than some of the jobs level data, the industry level data that we have available to us, which is only through second quarter of last year. As I said, right now, you're tied for the top with Polk County at 3.3% unemployment rate, which, again, by historical standards, is still low. A lot of people focus their attention on those people who are discouraged workers, and I'm going to tell you, we don't have any of those around here. We don't have discouraged workers. If you're discouraged, it's because you've got too many jobs available to you. Right now, the difference between these two numbers, U5 and U2, U3 is the total unemployed. That's the typical unemployment rate that we focus on. U5 includes discouraged workers, and the difference between these is 0.9%. And so discouraged workers a few years ago, back during the Great Recession, could amount to almost the same number, the same percentage as the unemployment rate. We had unemployment rates of 10%, 12%. We had discouraged worker rates of 8 and 10% as well. Okay, so discouraged workers are not in our area right now. Quits have basically stopped. Okay, so when you look at the number of quits here, we're basically back to where we were. In fact, we're a little below where we were prior to the beginning of COVID. And so we're not seeing the kind of quits now that we were. Basically, a lot of these quits that remain out of work are people who were actually retiring. And so they may be gone from the labor force, but there's opportunities for us to gain new workers from schools, talk to Trent. And so there's opportunities out there still. The labor force for all 6 counties now accounts for 347,000 workers. Okay, and that's a significant increase. In West Georgia, we've actually seen the number of jobs in the West Georgia region up by 4.7% year over year. That's just over the past year. Okay, so it doesn't look like we're in a recession right now. And by the way, I don't know if you know this is early 2024. So just keep in mind that part of what we were talking about at the Capitol yesterday is right now. So we're not currently in a recession here. If the recession is going on in early 2024, it's likely to start at the national level and work its way towards us. And we, as indicated, we might not see that. It might be a lot less likely that we see a recession in Georgia than we see a recession nationwide. This is the map for the West Georgia region, not just the state. In 2023, we've added a total of 2.8% in terms of jobs. So that's year over year. And that's a significant increase, even though it's not as big as we added in 2021 and 2022. If you look at it by historical standards, it takes us all the way back to 2005, 6, and 7 before we start seeing job growth rates at that level. So we're still doing well by historical standards in terms of job growth. Areas where we're seeing some declines, in Douglas County, we've seen some goods production jobs that have declined, but we've made up for a lot of those with service providing jobs and some government. All total, Douglas County added 4.8% in terms of their total employment in the county. So these are jobs located in the county. A lot of those jobs came from places like healthcare, transportation and warehousing. Additionally, you added almost 2,000 jobs in this category called administrative, support, waste, remediation. Basically, this is the category that contains temp workers. And so the only negative that I would point out here associated with that is that typically temp workers are used when people are uncertain about the economy. They use temp workers rather than using full-time workers. And some of you in here may actually be part of a temp agency. You're probably doing pretty well right now because you're supplying so many workers to so many different positions out there. Temp workers are in demand right now. I want to point out also that over the past year, Douglas County added 275 new firms. This is a chamber meeting. You should know this. These are potential members of this organization. All industries in West Georgia have seen significant gains. We've seen increases in the number of employed. We've also seen increases in real wages. So pay has been going up faster than the rate of inflation, at least in West Georgia. And it's been going up in places like goods production. We've seen a significant increase in wages. We've seen a little bit of an increase in employment. Service provision is up significantly. Healthcare is probably among services the brightest spot in West Georgia. We've had so many new healthcare workers come into the region. And in fact, it's basically been a straight line in growth, except for, ironically, in the middle of COVID. Apparently, a healthcare emergency is one way that you can actually shut down hospitals and doctors' offices. So I can tell you from experience, a lot of the care that people were receiving, walk-in care, basically was done away with for about 4 months. And so that was a significant downturn for the healthcare industry during that period. I'm going to speed up a little bit because I want to make sure and get through all this. Retail is one area that we've actually seen declines in jobs, and a lot of this has to do with the transition from brick and mortar retail to online retail. And Douglas County is part of both of those. You've seen a little bit of a decline, maybe a lot of decline around the mall, and you've seen increases in online retailers pop up in your area. There's, in fact, a lot of those around surrounding counties as well. Manufacturing, the pay is up, but the number of workers are down. One area of manufacturing that's incredibly important for our region is automotive manufacturing, and when we look at automotive, it's kind of a mixed bag right now. We're seeing used car prices down, which translates usually into new car prices starting to fall. So we're seeing a combination of two different areas. New car prices not falling quite as fast and not in that transition quite as far as in used cars. But when we're talking about sales volume, it's actually starting to rise. It went down quite a bit, but with higher prices, car dealerships were still making good money. But they're starting to see more sales now than they did before. Parts are up, and specifically manufacturing in automotive parts manufacturing, it's still trending in the upward direction pretty strongly. Last thing I want to point out here about automotive is that car ages continues to rise. Right now, the average age of a car on the road is 12.2 years. Only a few years ago, it was more like 8.5, 9 years. And as cars become more reliable and they stay on the road longer, it means that we're probably going to be relying on fewer and fewer replacement autos over time. This is going to have an impact on the industry overall. Construction is up both in pay and in employment. And one of the things I want to point out is if you see a vehicle like this, the reason is a construction worker can now pay for it. If you see this truck, you're going to pay a lot for that repair. So, construction, housing. I'm going to be quick about this. We have seen housing go through all kinds of gyrations, but it's still going relatively strong. We saw a lumber price spike, a small one, in 2020, another one in 2021 and 2022. We saw a big wage jump in the production of housing and construction, but we're still seeing an increase in the number of single-family permits. We saw a big decline right here in 2022, but it's basically back. However, it's at a relatively low level by historical standards. If you look all the way back into the 2000s, the early 2000s, we've never gotten back, and maybe that's a good thing, but we've never gotten back to the kind of production that we were seeing in 2000 through 2006. It's just not happening. And this huge decline that we saw all throughout this time frame, there are people that moved into our area that are looking for houses during this period that still aren't in a house that they want to own. Okay, and so there's still room for development out there. Days on the market is starting to trend back upward, and right now this is the average sales price. It's only started to wobble out here, but we're still at a relatively high price level for average price, or for houses. Has it continued upward? No, but what we're seeing right here is a wobble because uncertainty, an inability to purchase because there's not houses in the price point for a lot of buyers. We're seeing higher interest rates. Interest rates have been up as much as 7.5%. They're down a little bit now. And when you're looking at Douglas County, it basically mimics the rest of the region. And so again, days on the market are down but heading up, and prices are continuing upward with a little bit of wobble there at the end. Fixed rate 30-year mortgages are now down to 6.7 from 7.8%. This right here is an indication that not enough, we haven't lent as much money as there is out there. There's more dollars out there available for lending. Not as many loans are being made. Now, we have seen interest rates significantly higher historically, but right now this is probably the biggest drag in the housing market, is that people are just not as prepared to buy a house and to finance it when you're looking at 6.5% or 7% as they were obviously at 3 or 4%, which was available. But you can't really expect that to happen. Don't expect that to happen in the next year or so. Okay, so I think I've basically exhausted my time here. I want to make sure that we leave time for questions. And so I'm going to cut it short at this point and ask Jerry to come back here on stage and answer questions. So if you've got any questions, feel free to ask.
Question. We got microphone coming your way.
All right. I'm Isaac Esel from Serenity Empire Senior Living. I'm glad to know that the healthcare industry has added more jobs to help to the state of our economy. But at the same time, we still need more employees. We still need more workers. Especially on the senior living side, we can compete with Grady. We can compete with Wellstar. We can compete with the wage that they're paying when it comes to senior living. So most of our CNAs, our medtechs, are going to where they can have a higher pay. Now, our seniors are living longer. As a matter of fact, in Douglas County, we have one of our seniors who just turned 101 in our community, right down by 1600 Lee Road. That means that we are doing something good for the health of our seniors. That means we are helping them live a quality life, and their medication management is being well taken care of so that their families can also enjoy their loved ones for quite some time. So my question to you is, at this point, we need more healthcare workers, especially for the senior living space. We know that your data shows that we have more healthcare workers. We have personal care homes, assisted livings, and the turnover rate on the employees is growing up. It's getting higher because we don't have enough. What can you do, or what do you suggest that we do to contact or connect with our elected officials to make sure that we can have somewhat of a guest worker program from other countries where they are able to readily send more healthcare workers to us.
One of the things I would say is first we need to start off by looking at the programs that we have available and the needs individually. When you're talking about healthcare workers in the area, there's various tiers of healthcare workers, all the way from assistants, nursing assistants, all the way up to heart surgeons. And so looking at what programs we have in the state to provide those kinds of workers to the marketplace is probably a good first step. Looking at technical schools that do some of the entry-level training, all the way up to colleges and universities that, train the Bachelor of Science in Nursing, the nurse practitioners, all the way up to the doctors. And so right now we're drawing from basically everywhere in the country. In terms of doing guest worker programs, I'm not sure that that's something that can be easily accomplished at the state level. That's a federal level program that you would have to be initiating, and advocacy is probably the first place to start, but that's something I think you'd have to address a little further north than here, probably Washington, D.C.
Great. Next question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Tim Williams from Greystone. What, if anything, do you see as far as the homeowners insurance crisis in the country? Obviously, it's worse in, our coastal regions and all that, but when do you see it becoming a crisis if it's not already one? And how does that affect the housing industry?
You want to start?
You want me or?
I'll start.
Okay.
How's that? All right. Well, guess where I moved from? The state of Florida. My home in Florida, which I still have and I'm planning on keeping. I've been through 3 insurance agencies here recently, because here's what happens. Yeah, insurance company number 1 that I was with for several years went broke. And the state took over my policy, and then I was forced to, and they're supposed to give you 30 days notice, by the way. I didn't even get 30 days notice. I get this letter in the mail that says, hey, your insurance company's broken, we're taking it over from the state. And what had happened down there, and it's happened in Georgia as well, is litigation cost. Now, we had a bunch of hurricanes and a bunch of sinkholes and, that kind of stuff. But the litigation costs had gotten so high. But it's not just that. It's some of the insurance companies did some, interesting financial things. In other words, they would form a management company that they would pay lots of money to manage their company. And so a lot of the money got siphoned off. I don't know what's happening in Georgia, but that's what happened in Florida. And they kind of intended to go broke. They knew they would run out of money. So, let's not blame everything on bad weather or, personal trial attorneys, which we can blame them for a lot, but not all of this. But what's happened is I found another insurance company, got a really nice rate, got an upgrade in insurance really for less money than I paid. And then they noticed me about 3 months ago that they are leaving the state, that once my renewal is up. So now I have to do the same thing. And so what you see is, let's think about this. You have to let the insurance companies make money. You want them to follow the rules of, stewardship of their money and all those kind of things. But we do have a situation to where, some people are leaving Florida. Remember, in Georgia, Florida is the number 2 state for net migration. A lot of people have decided, hey, I can't afford to live down there anymore, or I can't find homeowners insurance, so, I can't buy this house, or I must sell my house and move somewhere else. So it's a bigger issue down there, and I gave maybe hundreds of speeches in the state of Florida, and I always remind people, Floridians should pay more for insurance. You live on the coast, you should pay more for insurance. you have a higher risk. We have to understand that. But, what happens is the insurance companies are, in some cases, smarter and quicker than the legislators to keep them from doing some of these financial shenanigans, if you want to call it that. So we've got that happening. We've got the litigation cost out of control. We got replacement costs. You saw the thing for lumber. You want to try to rebuild a house. Last year after the hurricane, after lumber went from $400, $1,000 to $2,100 $1,000. All those things, supply chain, you're trying to get wood, you were trying to get windows, you were trying to get anything, it was almost impossible. So for some of the same reason that car insurance is going up, higher repair costs, have been a big deal. Part of that supply chain and part of it's not. Then that is a big issue, because if you cannot get insurance for your home, you can't buy that home. And, people buying homes and moving in here is one of the things that has helped this economy do really well.
And one of the things I'd also point out is when you're talking about insurance companies, they tend to invest, or they're supposed to be good stewards of their money, but they invest the premiums, and if you've got people who are investing badly, then premiums go up to cover the difference. So if they end up losing money in their investments, they're going to end up raising premiums to cover that difference. And even though the stock market has been up, it's been down, it's been all around. You're talking about institutional investors that may not have done a really good job of picking their investment instruments. Mm-hmm. I think I saw this, by the way, I always say this, that about 96.5% of all stats are made up on the spot. Yeah. When you're looking at houses on the coast, on average, I think I read that it's not every house, but on average, a house lasts about 15 years on the coast. It's either 12 or 15 years, which means your insurance premium, if you're living on the coast, I don't mean inland, I mean right on the coast, should be about 1/12 or 1/15 of the value of your house. And I don't think there's anybody down there paying, on $1 million piece of property, they're not paying $100,000 a year for insurance, which is, that's, if you're covering the cost of that particular group, that's what they should be paying. They're pooling with a bunch of insured people who aren't on the coast, and they're the ones who are paying for that difference. You're subsidizing. You live in Douglas County, and you're subsidizing people who are living in Savannah for hurricanes, and they're subsidizing you for, the kind of natural disasters that we have here. I'm not even sure what that ice storms. Mm-hmm. That's basically the worst thing that happens here, right? You're from a power generation company. I would imagine ice storms are the ones you hate the most, mm-hmm. At least locally. And so those are also issues. It's that the folks are being pooled with people who are not on the coastline, and we're subsidizing. Another question? Trent's going real slow.
Get it quick before he makes it over here. Any more questions?
Guys, thank you.
No.
Thanks for having us.
You can't have a strong democracy without educated citizens. So thank you all for sharing that. And I do believe when he says that 96% of the data is made up on the spot. Okay, 96.5. But I do believe that the sad part is that 96.5% of people believe the 96.5 made up. That's the problem. If we could, change that other data, I think we'd be okay. I want to once again thank Greystone for being our corporate sponsor and partnering with the Chamber. So thank you, Greystone. And just a couple of announcements. We're very excited that the Douglas County Chamber is gearing up for their Winter Ball and Community Awards on February 3rd. So if you haven't bought or rented your tux yet, it's not too late. If you haven't ordered your dress to help the sales taxes in Douglas County or gone to the mall to pick it up, it is not too late. And if you're feeling generosity and you have some top shelf that you want to donate to make sure that everyone is feeling generous, please do so. We have what we call Stock the Bar Pool. So please support us. The Chamber uses all proceeds to support our mission to promote an inclusive business community that collaboratively drives economic growth, sustainability, and innovation for a lasting positive impact for the Douglas County region. So please secure your sponsorship or submit your Stock the Bar Pool items to Sarah and team by Friday, January 26th. Once again, thank you, Greystone, and have a wonderful, warm day in Douglas County. Thank you all. I'm sorry, no door prizes today.